Hello everybody and welcome back to Expert Examiner IELTS. My name is Glyn and in this video I'm going to give feedback on Ben's speaking test. Of course, Ben is an ex-IELTS examiner. He's also a L1 user of English, which means obviously he's going to get the band 9. Purpose of this video isn't to give him scores. The purpose is just to give a little bit of feedback on some of the answers, because I think some of the answers are really quite interesting and many of them might go against some of the information that you've already been taught. But anyway, let's get into it. We'll take a look and yeah, let's see. Good evening. My name is Glyn. Would you please tell me your full name?
Yeah, my name is Ben Meredith.
And what should I call you?
You can call me Ben.
Cool. So exactly what every examiner wants. Every examiner is worried that when we ask your name or what can I call you, that you're going to talk about something else and it's going to waste the time. This part of the test isn't judged. Short, simple. My name is What can I call you? You can call me Done. Great. Okay, thank you. Now, in this first part of the test, I'm going to ask you some questions about yourself. Do you work or do you study?
I work.
And
I'm
what?
a project coordinator.
Cool. And again, that's enough. I work, I'm a project coordinator. This question, do you work or do you study, is simply to help the examiner to understand the next set of questions. If you work, there are a set of questions about work. If you study, there are a set of questions about study. We don't need to go into crazy detail here. I work, maybe say what you do for your job, and that's enough. And how long have you been doing this job?
A few years.
Again, another very, very short answer. Now, many people might immediately think, well, this is poor development, isn't it? Well, yeah, if he answered every question like this, that would be poor development. But he doesn't answer every question like this. He just gives a straightforward answer to this question, a few years. Now, of course, if Ben was a student of mine, I might tell him, just be a little bit careful and maybe look to add some extra bits of information. But Ben obviously is an experienced person in this realm, knows that he can answer this question shortly, get on to the next question, and then develop later. And what do you like most about your job?
There's always something interesting going on. So lots of problems, lots of challenges, which is good, keeps it kind of interesting.
Cool. So again, not too long, but there is some nice development there. Do you think you'll still be doing this kind of work in 5 years?
I would expect so.
Cool. I would expect so. So we have a lot of these like substitution expressions in English, like I'm afraid so, I think so. They can be strange in the negative, like I don't think so, but I'm afraid not. But I would expect so. And this use of would, I would expect so. So natural. Actually, this like I would expect so, I think so, I don't think so. A lot of that is actually taught at C1 level in many textbooks, believe it or not. But yeah.
Maybe it's kind of what I do, so it's difficult for me to think of something completely different.
Cool. Obviously, Ben's accent and pronunciation on the money. I can't say anything about it, but the how connected the speech is, the sentence stress. He's an L1 user of English. It's his language. I shouldn't praise him for having good pronunciation. Let's talk about friends now. Do you have a lot of
Mm.
friends?
No, I wouldn't say I have a huge amount of friends.
Cool. Now, this might be considered a mistake, right? I wouldn't say I have a huge amount of friends. There are certainly resources available that say that we should use amount of with uncountable nouns and we should use number of with countable nouns. I know in the GMAT exam, I don't know how familiar you are with GMAT, but in the GMAT exam, if you have that like amount versus number, they would treat this as a mistake. But as someone with a background in sociolinguistics, for me, a big amount or large amount of friends, for me absolutely nothing wrong with that. So we always have that issue in English, especially because it's spoken by so many different people, these attitudes to like the correctness of the language. There are certainly purists who say no, we must use amount of plus uncountable nouns and number of with countable nouns. But in everyday speech, you do hear this. I have a huge amount of problems. I have a huge amount of friends, things like this. So it is written in the band descriptors, grammar mistakes typical of those that a native speaker might make. I think that's the wording they use, are acceptable. And this is a great example of a mistake that a native speaker might make and does make. And what do you usually do with your friends?
Oh, just hang out, pass the time. I do like
Cool, some nice natural expressions, hang out, pass the time. Yeah, those are colloquial and idiomatic.
games, so cards and things like that. So competitions.
Interesting, Ben doesn't always speak on the sentence level or on the clause level. He often gives short answers that don't include full sentences or full clauses. This is something that is absolutely fine for an L1 user to do. It can be risky when, if you're an intermediate student and you don't speak in full clauses, that can sometimes be an indicator to the examiner that maybe, the basics of the grammar isn't there. So it is one of those strange things where you see like very weak, very low level learners of English don't speak at the clause level, but also the highest users of English also sometimes don't speak at that like subject, verb, object. Oh, just pass the time, just hang out and, challenges, that type of stuff. It's an interesting thing for an examiner to consider, certainly. How often do you meet up with your friends?
Ooh, not a lot at the moment, but and
Not a lot at the moment. You hear those T's dropping. Not a lot at the moment.
really, when I think about like my friend group, they live all over the place. So
When I think about my friend group, they live all over the place. Beautiful intonation.
yeah, not often at all. Maybe every month or so.
And do you prefer having a small group of close friends or a lot of friends?
Oh, a small group. Yeah, absolutely,
Cool. Question is answered directly. Why?
much better.
Now I have to prompt here for why the candidate doesn't offer this information. And again, you could see this as evidence of that the candidate isn't ready to speak at length. But when we make this judgment, we don't make it on one individual question, but throughout the test as a whole. So far, there may have been like two questions now in total where perhaps Ben could have given a bit more information, but as we'll see throughout the test, Ben is willing to speak at length and able to speak at length. And so these two instances where the answers are a little bit short, that isn't going to count against him and it won't count against you. We always think about things over the test as a whole.
I just think it's good. You can only truly
You hear a bit of disfluency there. I just you can only these disfluencies are a completely natural part of spontaneous language production. When we produce language spontaneously in the moment, we do have these disfluencies, this repair work where we repeat certain things. Now, the examiner's job is to judge whether this happens because the candidate is trying to access language, grammar, and vocab, or if they're preparing content. Now, with Ben's personality type, he is that type of person who's always like a little talking a little bit like this. That's part of his character. It doesn't mean that he's a low level language user. And I think a lot of people try to get into their head of like the in the speaking test, your language should sound like it's scripted or it should sound, like there are no disfluencies. That doesn't happen, right? I trust me when I say I have an educational background in analyzing language, and this was a major part, comparing spontaneous language production with planned language production, analyzing different texts like spoken and written texts, looking for those features. And so these disfluencies are absolutely normal. In fact, it sounds strange, really strange, when people have zero disfluencies. It sounds like they're speaking from a script. So, yeah, you needn't worry about some disfluencies like this.
know a few people. So it's kind of pointless to have like a huge number of so-called friends.
Cool. Glad he uses number of friends this time. Well done, Ben. Now let's talk about the weather. What kind of weather do you like the most?
I like changeable weather actually. So
Cool. Changeable weather. It's a very, good adjective to describe weather.
that's when I like it the most. If I had to pick one, probably sunny, springy kind of
Cool. Love this colloquial use of adding y on the end of nouns to kind of um to turn it into an adjective like springy, summery type of weather. Cool. That's a very yeah, very natural way of
like
speaking.
a spring, nice breeze, something like that.
Trying to attempt at paraphrasing here. A nice breeze, again, very topic specific vocabulary. And what's the weather or climate like in your country?
Well, where I live right now, it is very, very changeable. So,
So, just for a bit of reference, Ben lives in France, I think, at the moment, north of France, Brittany, maybe. I don't know, somewhere on the coast.
it can be anything from gale force winds
But he's from the UK originally. Gale force winds, again, very natural vocab.
to bright sunny beach days.
Cool. And how does the weather affect your mood?
I don't know that it does.
I don't know that it does. Notice this use of the auxiliary verb does here. I don't know that it does. And does here substitutes the rest of the clause. I'm not sure that it affects my mood, right? So does is the replacement here for that verb phrase, affects my mood. I'm not sure that it affects my mood. I'm not sure that it does. Again, this is high level grammar with substitution.
Like, I don't get depressed when it's raining,
Cool paraphrase. It explains in more detail. I don't get depressed when it's raining to help the listener understand.
for example. But I suppose maybe when it's like raining outside, then
Good subordination. When it's raining outside, then
it kind of it can make me more contemplative.
cool. Nice couple of things. It can make me plus adjective. Cool. Causative make. Very nice. Contemplative. So beautiful, beautiful adjective. Makes good use of the suffix here, contemplative. Many people might know the verb to contemplate something. To contemplate means like to sit and think about something in a deep or serious way, and contemplative is the adjective. There aren't many people that can produce that language on the spot. Thank you. Now, in this next part of the test, I'm going to give you a topic. Okay, so immediate thoughts on part one. Ben does develop his answers. There are one or two answers that are a little bit underdeveloped, but one or two slightly underdeveloped answers really isn't going to be a problem. Pronunciation, I don't need to say anything. Grammar, he's not trying to use any difficult grammar, right? He's saying, "Oh, I don't think it does." And a lot of people might not realize that that's, super appropriate grammar. He's not trying to throw in any, like, I don't know, difficult bits of inversion, or nothing seems forced about it. Ben isn't thinking about the grammar that he's using. He used earlier, like, oh, if I had to choose one, I'd probably go for something, using this hypothetical language. So that grammar is emerging, and he's producing that grammar without forcing it. And of course, that's something that an L1 user can do, but it's also something that C2 candidates and C1 candidates can do too, that they can produce that complicated grammar without really, having to think about it, without having to construct it first. It comes out of them naturally. And there's no way around this. If you are a B1 student and you think, what grammar can I use to get a C1 score? If you're like band 5 and you want band 7 in grammar or band 8 in grammar, you just can't do it. It's not enough to, just learn the formula of a third conditional or something like that, or to learn the formula of reported speech and then try to activate it mechanically. It will be spotted. IELTS is a test of a person's speaking ability. I know a lot of people think that no, IELTS just tests your ability to pass IELTS. That's certainly not true in the speaking test. There are strategies you can follow for part two, and there are certain strategies that might raise your score by 0.5 bands, but there are no strategies that will raise your score by 2 bands or 3 bands or even 1.5 bands. Your language level will be measured and evaluated naturally. You can't go in and prepare and think, oh, I'm going to use this bit of grammar and that's going to elevate my score to the next level. Don't listen to what everyone else is telling you on YouTube. Use these 3 words in vocab to get a band 9. It does not work like that. Anyway, let's have a look at Ben's part two. And I would like you to speak your 1 minute. Mind you, you'll have between 1 and 2. So Ben's task here is to describe a place that he enjoys visiting. Let's see how he does. 2 minutes to give your talk, and I will let you know when the time is up. Can you start speaking now, please?
Yeah, so difficult to choose actually, but I'm gonna talk a little bit about a place which is quite near to where I am now. It's called Pont Miller.
Cool. So we have a nice introduction, a little bit of, preamble or a little bit of like introductory language. Oh, it's quite hard to choose actually, but okay,
And it's
nothing wrong with that.
like a walk, right? So it's a coastal walk along kind of cliffs.
Cool coastal walk, cliffs, all of this great vocab.
It's really it's very kind of cliffy and
Okay, cliffy.
steep.
Steep is the opposite of flat. If you don't know, flat is like this. A hill that is steep is like this.
To get down, but then eventually you actually get to kind of the water level, and there are small
Get to the water level. Great use of get, meaning arrive.
beaches, and then you climb back up.
I will say that this is just Ben's way of speaking, that he's quite an expressive person who uses his hands. Sometimes I see that as from a candidate as a sign that they might not have enough linguistic resources to explain exactly what they need, that they need their hands to kind of add that extra stuff. I know this is part of Ben's character, that he needs to use his hands because he is an expressive kind of person. But in general, for most candidates, I would say avoid doing too much of this and let your language do the
And
work.
then go over the hills, and it's just blustery sometimes, and then down into other beaches. And it's just yeah, it's a great walk.
So cool, we get a description, a factual description of what it's like, and now we get into the subjective stuff of, yeah, it's a great walk. Okay,
I don't. How often do I go there?
cool. So this is really instructive. How often do I go there? He's going back to the prompt, reading the question out loud, changing, of course, the subject from you to I. And he's also changing the wording. You should say how often you go there is not in that question form, but he reads it back to himself as how often do I go there, which is a type of paraphrase. Now I know that there are some experts on some experts on YouTube that tell you, oh, don't answer these questions and don't read these questions out loud. You can do that. There is no 100% right, 100% wrong way of doing IELTS. If you want to read these questions, if you want to cleft these questions, like what I do there is da 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 da. You can do that. Some people ignore the questions and they make up their own prompts. Okay, fine. The task is just to describe a place you enjoy visiting. I personally believe that you should attack these prompts, that if these prompts are there, these things will help to simplify your answer, and you should use them. You should answer them. And it's okay if you're speaking about something, you can go back to that prompt and say, okay, how often do I go there? And then answer the question. There's nothing wrong with it.
Like maybe about 4 or 5 times a year, and I'd probably say like actually yeah, once a season,
Cool, 4 or 5 times a year. And I would probably say once a season. So nice paraphrasing
right?
again.
Because it's a completely different place, and everywhere is like seasonal changes, but you really see them in this. It's a completely different place
Nice intonation, but you really see them really adding that emphasis.
in every different season. And what do I do there? Well, you go for a
Again, what do I do there? Well, again, he's asking himself the question and then answering the question. It is perfectly fine to do that. Of course, sometimes this can make your speech sound mechanical. You really have to get that intonation right. But there's nothing wrong with doing it.
walk, really. So you move through, but there is one really beautiful spot where you descend, go through some trees, and it opens out onto the sea. And Yeah, it's nice to sit there. It's nice to take along a bottle of cider and
Take along, nice phrase, but to take along a bottle of cider.
shuck some oysters.
Shuck some oysters. I'm not sure if many of you are oyster shuckers or if you're familiar with the act of shucking, but very, very precise language.
Very good. Yeah, I still have more time to speak, I take it, right?
Cool. And this is very instructive. He has more time to speak. At the moment, we're at about 1 minute 30. Now, if there's a long enough pause, I'll probably end it and say thank you. So I give him just a bit of time and he just doesn't freak out. He doesn't panic. He says, oh, I guess I have more time, I take it. And then he continues. He doesn't freak out. He doesn't panic. He doesn't worry.
Right. So, what else do we do there?
He buys some time by asking himself a question.
Well, not swimming, right? Because it's like too cold. But I suppose it's like it's one of those places which is like a
Love this use of suppose. I suppose it's like quite hedging with the language.
great contemplation spot. It's always empty. Hardly anyone knows about
Great. It's always empty. Hardly anyone knows about it. Again, really, really successful paraphrasing.
it, and especially when it's kind of like not in the holiday seasons, it can be a really really great empty place to be,
Okay, thank
and
you. Cool. So he finishes, he completes the whole, um, the fills up the whole 2 minutes, and then I end it there, say thank you, and we move on to part three. So really, really good part two. Um, really, it really is instructive how Ben here, he's not afraid to ask those questions out loud that are written on the prompt and then answer them. There's nothing wrong with doing that. Also, when he runs out of time, he doesn't freak out. He just says, oh, I guess I have more time to speak. What else do I do there? Well, and you can see him thinking and producing the language in real time. I still think that for polished candidates, if you're a candidate who prepares for this, you really should learn how to spend this 1 minute of preparation time to really get a plan that will help you fill the 2 minutes. Now, this is something that can take a bit of time to do, or at least, you might need to do it like 10 or 15 times. But I really think candidates should be super prepared for part two, and they know exactly what 2 minutes feels like. Ben obviously agreed to do this at the last minute. Basically, I just said, like, hey, do you want to do an IELTS test? And he said, sure, let's do it. So, he wasn't thinking much about IELTS. He used to be an IELTS examiner a few years ago, but I guess he's done a million other things since then. And Ben is one of these examiners that's like, yeah, all of this, like, official instruction that people get from, course books maybe are okay, but from a lot of institutions that prepare their candidates for IELTS in this mechanical, robotic, like strategizing, formulaic way. Ben is very much against that, and he's very much in favor of the free speaking candidates. And so, that's why he doesn't need to worry too much about preparing, because he likes this natural approach. Anyway, let's get to part three. All right, so you've been talking about a place you enjoy visiting. Um, let's move on now and talk about visiting places in general. Why do people like visiting new places?
new places. I
New places, cool.
suppose there's always something to be taken by
There is always something to be taken by. It's incredibly context in terms of grammar. There is always something to be taken by. Wow, there is always something, and we get that passive infinitive, to be taken by. Again, it might not sound like overly complex grammar to a lot of candidates, but I promise this is very high level grammar.
seeing new things.
How? By seeing new things. This use of by plus gerund to explain how you do something. Very natural.
It's a way of invigorating life. I suppose like if you move to a new place as well, then it can feel like time slows down, especially if it's like a more difficult place and things take longer. It feels like a day can be a few weeks.
Yeah, it's a very sophisticated and complicated idea. I always prefer ideas to be a little bit simpler. Obviously, Ben's not thinking about how simple or difficult his ideas is. He's just speaking from the heart. He's saying, he's speaking to me like a guy speaking to a guy, not like a candidate speaking to an examiner. And I think that is a great approach to take. But I think this idea is a little bit, sophisticated and more complicated than the average candidate could manage. And how do people's preferences for places to visit change as they get older?
Better seating, better heating.
Again, notice he's not on the clause level here. He's just giving short answers. Hope, of course, he will develop.
I don't know what old people maybe they want to go
And in terms of idea generation here, a lot of people think that they need to produce the perfect idea immediately. You don't. You can take that bit of time. It's a very natural thing to answer a question with some possible ideas and to do some thinking as you're speaking and then arrive at a conclusion like, I don't know, better seating or better heating, or I don't know, maybe some people, part three is designed in this way where there's no absolute right answer and you have to real time speak and think and try a few different ideas and settle on an idea. Again, very instructive.
To fewer new places. I don't think that's right though. I think it depends on
Cool. And you can see there's internal conflict. He's disagreeing with himself now, but he's doing this out loud, not in his head.
the person. Maybe when you get older, you start to think more about things like bucket lists and like where you haven't been and you really need
Cool. So he settles on an idea. So he's thinking, and then I'm not sure if that's true. I'd probably disagree. Maybe older people, they focus on things like bucket lists. So he settles on an idea eventually.
to go before you die.
I always advise candidates it's better to avoid any dark subjects or controversial subjects. Some people have strong political views or religious views. I always recommend avoiding those topics and, things to do before you die. Uh, yeah, I would recommend not going down that route in the IELTS test. Would you agree that younger people are more adventurous or take more risks when it comes to the places that they visit?
Um, yeah, maybe taking more
You can hear, yeah, you can see that that hesitation is caused by preparing the content, thinking of the idea, thinking of the question, not thinking of the grammar or the vocab.
risk with things like accommodation, right? Or like staying in dangerous places. And I suppose like that's always going to be either a combination of like naivety.
Cool, great use of the suffix there or the word building, naivety. Many people might know the adjective naive, but not that many people know the noun form of naivety. Good.
Or inexperience.
And we get the prefix inexperience. So, maybe people might say, oh, when you don't have experience, but inexperience as the noun, very good stuff. Ben has great word building abilities.
And then also money, right? Because you just don't have a lot of cash when you're young, so you're more
Cool, nice paraphrasing. Money, right? Because you don't have a lot of cash. Money, cash, money, cash.
likely to stay in hostels.
You're more likely to, again, very, very nice predictive language. You are more likely to. We get this impersonal use of you, not people, but you, meaning people in general. You are more likely to stay in places, to be more likely to do something. Again, very, very natural, accurate, precise grammar.
Or dodgy places. And
Dodgy places. Dodgy is an adjective, a little bit informal, means like something you can't trust or something that's not very reliable. Now let's talk about tourism. What role does tourism play in the economy of your country?
well, I can talk a little bit about where I am now, right? So, in Finisterre in France, it's the, like if I look out now, I can see
So again, I'd recommend, you don't get extra points for making eye contact, but sometimes it is a little bit strange if somebody is looking away all the time. But I know Ben is, probably looking at a window in his home. Um,
that maybe only 20% of the lights are on, and the reason is that the other 80% are
and the reason is that, right? So of course we can use because, we can use these like conjunctions, but and the reason is that. Very nice.
owned by Parisians or things like that, right?
Great noun, Parisians. So a Parisian is someone who lives in Paris.
So like it is really this town thrives on its beach economy in the
Cool, to thrive on something. Nice collocation.
summer, and then it's dead for 8 months.
Cool, good colloquial use of dead, meaning, it's not very lively. There's not a lot of, activities or events. And what are some of the problems that too much tourism can cause?
Well, prices going up, right? So, like again, you talk about people, especially well, different thing, tourism to second homeowners, right? But I suppose,
Second homeowners, again, that's the type of language you just wouldn't expect an L2 user of English to produce. Second homeowners.
yeah, like I think if you're talking about like people who come to somewhere like this, a coastal resort, you can have a big flurry of stuff in the summer.
Cool. You can hear the emotion, the emotive range in Ben's speech too. You can hear there's an excitement when he's talking about a flurry of something. You can really hear that in the emotion, in the intonation, in the pronunciation. It's something, lower level learners tend to speak on one level, right? It doesn't matter if they're happy or if they're sad. Like, oh, I am very happy because I have just received a lot of good news. But then now I am very sad because I have received a lot of bad news. But you don't get that emotive range in the pronunciation of a B1 user of English. But we see this with the L1 user. Like there's a huge flurry of something. You get this real emotive range.
But then everything falls apart. So you can't really have like very difficult to open a new business and keep it going all year round. But people do okay with like pop ups and stuff.
Cool intonation. Exciting, 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 exciting. But slow, 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 slow. So this is great intonation over long stretches of speech. And how do you think the tourism industry might change in the future?
Speaking about here, I think it's probably
The Ben's talking about his hometown, and that's okay. I do think in part three we want to think in a more global sense, but okay.
going to get busier and busier because the south of France, which has always been popular, is now just too hot. So, like, lots of people from the south of France come to spend summers in windy, wet Brittany uh, just to get away from the heat.
So something examiners might do here, they might think, okay, well, the candidate can speak about their own local area, right? We often find that lower level learners find it much easier to speak about themselves than they do about, less familiar topics. And so I step in with a follow-up question. And what about things in a more global sense? How do you think tourism might change in general in the future? Just to check that the candidate can do that wider world thing.
Um, uh, well, I think
Again, Ben's not worried. Ben's not worried here. He doesn't freak out. He doesn't have an opinion immediately that comes to mind. He's never, well, maybe he's thought about it before, but it's unlikely that he's thought about this recently. He hasn't prepared for this. He hasn't learned a bunch of vocab and grammar to talk about how the tourism industry might change in the future. He's just going inside his brain and searching for an opinion. He's verbalizing something like, I think maybe, he's doing this, but he's not panicking. He doesn't have immediate, idea generation. Nobody does. It's part three. You're not supposed to have that. But he doesn't freak out. Brrr. Very nice. Brrr.
probably you were probably looking at things like
And then he, gets an idea and then verbalizes.
regulation on things like Airbnb, right? Because that's like you can see the impact that it's having on cities, famously Barcelona. But
Maybe give a bit of detail there. I don't know what impact Airbnb is having on Barcelona. So, candidates should be careful sometimes not to assume that the examiner knows too much. And, if in doubt, then be ready to explain.
many, many more. So yeah, it'll become a lot more regulated, hopefully.
Some people think that due to environmental pressures, people will take fewer flights in the future and they might have something like virtual holidays. Do you think this would be a good thing?
Yeah, why not? I mean, the Total Recall was a great film,
I haven't seen it, don't know. Sorry.
and yeah, that was predicated on that, right? So like that's
Cool. That was predicated on that. Oh, that was predicated on that. Again, you might not notice it, but this is that type of specific language that really, really pushes it beyond Band 9.
that's it. That's why wouldn't you pay for an experience and be able to have it without actually cluttering and messing up a place?
Can you think of any downsides of such holidays?
Well, yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter how good the technology is, I suppose, like the
Again, listen to the emotive range when he's talking about things that really aren't that nice. You can kind of see it in his face a little bit too. Well, yeah, I suppose you don't really. Sorry for my exaggerated facial expressions, but facial expressions often, come hand in hand with pronunciation. That when we're really happy, we have like this happy facial expression. And then when we're talking about things that aren't so good, the face looks a little bit like this, and the voice also sounds a little bit like this. This is why some people like to practice speaking in front of the mirror, especially with their emotive range, practicing speaking in an angry way, in a happy way, in a confused way, in a scared way, and so on.
you you can't really, you're still going to be devoid of certain senses which you would need, and also like just the beautiful, I suppose when you're traveling, then there's a higher instance rate going on, so more things happen to you, right? Than if you're just kicking it at home just because it's new.
If you're kicking it at home, a lot of people might know this phrase verb to kick back, to relax, but also if you're kicking it at home, to kick it somewhere, again, means to relax. And again, it's the type of language that I feel like an L1 user can use, and maybe a C2, C1 user might use. Usually, when A2 and B1 users try to use it, it sounds a little bit strange. Like, what did you do yesterday? Oh, I kicked it, and it doesn't quite sound right. It has to be, some of these expressions, these colloquial expressions, they have to be embedded. They have to be part of a longer context building stretch of speech, right? What did you do yesterday? Oh, nothing. I was really exhausted, so I just kicked it at home and watched some Netflix. Here, it sounds fine because it's inside that context of everything else. But if you just say, what did you do yesterday? I kicked it. It doesn't work.
And you can mess up or you can have accidents, or you're
Mess up. Nice. Make a mistake to mess up.
moving through life and something will happen, and it happens a lot more when you're traveling. So,
Thank
oh,
you.
sorry, God, I think I lost my point there.
Thank you. That is the end of the test. All right, so very instructive, I hope. A few people made some comments saying that his cohesion wasn't very good. I don't know what I don't know what more you expect. I thought his cohesion was absolutely fine. You might think, well, the fluency wasn't very good. Some people say, oh, he said Yeah, guess what? That's how we speak. That's what spontaneous language production sounds like. Spontaneous language production doesn't sound like, where are you from? Oh, I am from Caerphilly, which is located approximately 15 kilometres from Cardiff, which is the capital city of Wales and has a historical tradition boasting many beautiful sites, including castles, shopping centres, and other tourist attractions, including shopping malls and ice rinks. Right? Spontaneous language production doesn't sound perfect with that articulation. Ben doesn't always speak at the sentence level, at the clause level. Sometimes he gives short answers. Oh, just swimming, or not that, or something like that. But then he develops using sentences. Of course, Ben's not overly worried about trying to use high level vocab, high level grammar, but this language still comes out of him because that's what his language level is. Um, yeah, I love Ben's natural approach to this. He's not never freaked out. He doesn't worry. He's not trying to impress anyone. He's a guy speaking to a guy in English. And that's, really, really, really what examiners will judge you on. There's I understand it's a test, and if you're trying to get the highest mark that you want, you might, try to heighten your language. Some people wrote in the comments that, oh, it would be much better if he used more academic language. Why? The IELTS speaking test is not an academic test, right? The academic writing, you have to, have appropriate register for this. The speaking test is your ability to speak English in a natural, comfortable situation, not in a high pressure job interview or public presentation type. This isn't an academic test. The speaking test judges your ability to use spoken English in a natural way, not in an unnatural way. Anyway, I hope my feedback and I hope Ben's speaking has been instructive to you. A few people asked for me to do this with an L1 user, and some other people asked for me to be a candidate. I am going to do that. My approach to Ben's will be slightly different because I'm going to, try to do it using only the simplest language and the simplest of ideas, just to show you how, you really don't need a lot of crazy difficult stuff in your language to get a band 7 at least. But more on that in the future. Hope you enjoyed it. More videos coming soon. Have a wonderful day. But for now, bye bye.